After years of living in what I had convinced myself was a community dedicated to enlightenment and mutual care, I came to the harrowing realization that I was, in fact, part of a Doomsday cult. Our leader, a charismatic figure with an enigmatic aura, had persuaded us that the outside world was on the brink of collapse and that only through our isolation could we find salvation. Our commune, nestled in a remote forest, was a picturesque emblem of self-sufficiency, or so it seemed. We grew our own food, maintained our shelters, and followed a strict regimen of spiritual exercises designed to prepare us for the impending apocalypse. Life was rigid, governed by the leader's interpretations of ancient texts and prophecies, which he claimed to have exclusive insight into. As time wore on, however, the veneer of utopia began to crack. Questions or doubts were met with severe punishment, isolation, or re-education. I witnessed a friend being taken to the Enlightenment Chamber, a small, dark room where they would spend days without food or water for the mere act of questioning a minor rule. It was then that the seeds of doubt began to sprout in my mind. My turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, during a gathering in the central hall, our leader announced that the final day was imminent, closer than we had ever anticipated. The air grew heavy with a mix of fear and exhilaration, but instead of the usual sermons on readiness and purification, he spoke of a final act, a collective sacrifice that would ensure our ascension to a higher existence beyond the doomed earthly realm. Panic gripped my heart. The thought of it was too much to bear, and in that moment, I knew I had to escape. That night, under the cover of darkness, and with nothing but the clothes on my back and a few stolen provisions, I made my break from the commune. The forest that had once seemed like a protective embrace now loomed over me with intimidating obscurity. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sent shivers down my spine as I imagined my former brethren, or worse, the leader himself, trailing behind me. After what felt like hours, I emerged from the forest, greeted by the unfamiliar sight of a road. I had no idea where it led, but it was a symbol of the world I had been taught to fear and shun. With a mixture of dread and determination, I followed it, driven by the desperate hope of finding refuge, or at least a semblance of the world I had left behind years ago. The world outside the cult's grasp was both exhilarating and terrifying. I was free, yet the weight of that freedom pressed down on me with a heavy hand. Every interaction was tinged with the fear that someone might be an agent of the cult, sent to drag me back to what they promised would be my ultimate salvation, but what I knew to be my doom. In the weeks that followed my escape, I lived in a state of constant movement. I avoided staying in any one place for too long, afraid that any pattern or predictability could lead my pursuers right to me. I survived by doing odd jobs, never revealing too much about myself, and always paying in cash to avoid leaving a digital footprint that could be traced. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, a new realization dawned on me. Hiding and running were no way to live. I began to yearn for something more, a way to not just survive, but to truly start over and build a life free from the shadows of the past. It was with this newfound resolve that I decided to reach out for help. I had heard whispers of organizations that assisted people in escaping from cults, providing them with the resources and support needed to reintegrate into society. The thought of contacting one filled me with a mix of hope and terror. What if it was a trap? But the sliver of hope won out over fear, and I made the call that would change the course of my life. The voice on the other end of the phone was gentle and understanding. They didn't press for details, they simply listened and offered help. Within days, I was meeting with a representative in a nondescript coffee shop in a city far from the commune. They provided me with a new identity, a place to stay, and the promise of psychological support to help me process the trauma I had endured. As I settled into this new phase of my life, the paranoia that had been my constant companion began to recede. I started attending therapy sessions, where I learned to untangle the web of manipulation and control that had been spun around me. It was a painful process, confronting the depth of the deception I had lived under, but with each session, I felt a little more like the person I had been before the cult, or perhaps the person I was always meant to become. Yet, even as I began to build a new life, the specter of the cult's final act haunted me. The thought that there were still people trapped in that nightmare, possibly facing their end, weighed heavily on my heart. I knew I couldn't just move on and forget about them. Driven by a newfound sense of purpose, I started to work with the organization that had helped me escape. I shared my story with them, providing as much detail as I could about the layout of the commune, the daily routines, and the security measures that kept us all prisoner. Together, we began to plan a rescue operation to save those still trapped within the cult's clutches. As I lay in bed each night, planning and preparing for the day we would attempt the rescue, I realized that my journey was far from over. It had morphed into something far bigger than just my escape. It was now about saving others and confronting the darkness of the cult head-on. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a fighter, determined to bring light to the shadows and hope to those who were still lost in the grip of the cult. The road ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty, but for the first time, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. As the days edged closer to the planned rescue, tension knotted in my stomach, a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Working with the organization, we meticulously mapped out every detail of the operation, aware that any mistake could mean disaster, not just for us, but for those we aimed to save. Then, just 2 nights before we were set to move, I received a call that sent my world spinning. The voice on the other end was one I never expected to hear again. My friend from the cult, the one taken to the enlightenment chamber that had first sowed the seeds of doubt in my mind. Their voice was a whisper, but the urgency in it was palpable. "It's a trap," they said. "The leader knows. He's always known about the organization, about your escape, everything. You need to stop." The call ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving me in a whirl of confusion and fear. How could the leader have known? Had my every move since escaping been watched? And more terrifyingly, was the organization that had helped me actually infiltrated by the cult? With no time to waste, I contacted the organization, relaying the warning I had received. The decision was made to accelerate the operation, to move in the next 24 hours before the cult could further anticipate our actions. It was a gamble, but one we felt we had to take. The day of the rescue dawned gray and foreboding. As we approached the commune, every scenario played out in my mind. I was prepared for confrontation, for the possibility of not making it out again. But nothing could have prepared me for what we found. The commune was deserted. No guards, no followers, no leader. It was as if the cult had vanished into thin air. Confusion reigned among our group until we found it, the note left in the center of the communal hall, addressed to me by name. The note revealed the shocking truth, the cult's doctrine of the end times, the isolation, the preparation for a collective sacrifice. It had all been an elaborate setup. The leader, with his deep insights into human psychology and manipulation, had crafted the entire scenario as a psychological experiment, pushing the boundaries of faith, loyalty, and fear. And I, by escaping and resisting, had provided the unpredicted variable that ultimately led to the experiment's conclusion. The twist was a blow I hadn't seen coming. The cult, the escape, the pursuit, it had all been part of a controlled environment designed to study extreme belief systems and the power of charismatic leadership. The organization that helped me had been real, but the leader's influence had extended even into its ranks, allowing him to manipulate events from the shadows. As I stood there reading the note over and over, a mix of emotions washed over me. Anger, betrayal, but also a strange sense of relief. The danger had been real, but so had my journey of escape and self-discovery. In the end, I had emerged not just as a survivor, but as someone who had faced the darkest depths of human manipulation and come out the other side. The cult's end was a twist, but so too was the beginning of my true freedom. I was free from the fear of being pursued, free to live without looking over my shoulder. And with that freedom came a new resolve, to use my experience to help others who find themselves lost in the shadowy world of manipulation and control, whether in cults or in other forms of coercive environments. The story of my escape from the Doomsday cult had come to an end, but the story of my life was just beginning. With a heart both heavy and hopeful, I stepped forward into a future of my own making, determined to turn the pain of the past into a force for good. Thank you for listening to my channel.